Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Today's episode is brought to you by the Athena Wellness Academy, your resource for wholehearted living. The Academy's featured offering is an online course called From Type A to Type B, How to Mindfully Descend the Corporate Ladder and Invite What's Next. This course is perfect for you if you're contemplating or navigating a professional transition, and it's available as a self-study or with a small cohort of students facilitated by me, Kathy Robinson. To learn more, I invite you to go to athenawellnessacademy.teachable.com or click on the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. Imagine a shattering, life-altering heartbreak. One that brings you to your knees in an empty abyss where you question who you are, who you love, and your purpose in the world. That was the beginning of a 6-year healing process my guest experienced and not only thrived, but wrote the book she wished she had in those dark days. I'm joined today by author and entrepreneur Shirin Etessam. Shirin's book is scheduled for release on June 20th, 2023, entitled Free to Be, a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul. Here's what we cover. The heartbreak and transformation that were the spark for the book. The importance of soul reclamation. The impact of information overload and how to minimize it. How awareness can help you manage your thoughts and emotions, the role of play in reclaiming your soul and self, and how to proactively manage identity loss by redefining yourself. You can learn more about Shirin at ShirinEtessam.com, and I'll put a link to her website in the show notes. I'll also link up her book, her streaming media company, and the Rolling Stone article we mention in the episode. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy the conversation and find it healing. Shirin, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So please share a bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, my background, I think, is quite similar to yours in that though I was in entertainment, film production, and the agency world, and I'm still actually in it. So I created my own agency, and I also have a 24/7 TV channel and platform dedicated to queer female content that I started in 2009. That's called OML Television, and it's done fairly well, which makes me very happy. And we have a production division, OML Originals, based on that. So many, many ventures. And in 2013, I went through a massive breakup with my partner of 13 years. And we had been friends for 9 years prior to that. And 22 years of love, friendship, partnership, commitment vanished after a 20-minute conversation. And it threw me into just this really dark abyss of nothingness. And I was not only afraid because I didn't know what was going on. I was also confused by it because I felt that I had all of the worldly goods that everyone, strives for, and, the accolades, the awards, the positions, the companies. And I realized really early on that this wasn't just a matter of a broken heart. And I decided at that point that I was going to really dive in and find out what it was. And I went on a major soul journey, and it took me 6 years. Mind you, this is like day in, day out as I'm doing all my various ventures and being single mom to two beautiful souls, but challenging. And I left no stone unturned, looked in every nook and cranny. And I'd like to say that it was like this amazing process, but it was really often sloppy and confusing and dark and frightening. And along the way, I had a lot of aha moments and started seeing the light, but I didn't want it to be superficial. And also the grief that I was feeling. I didn't want anyone to tell me what my process was going to be or how long I needed to grieve. And so it took me 6 years, but I call it my magical mystery tour because it was, I mean, in looking back, it was incredible. So I took those 6 years. I realized that if I knew what I was doing in those 6 years, that the process that I went through could really be distilled into 6 weeks. You're welcome. And so I wrote the book that I wish I had when I was at that crossroad. When we are at whatever crossroad that is, whether it's a divorce or a loss of a loved one or a loss of a country or loss of a job, whatever that is, a major life transition. But someone had recently asked me who the book is for. And what came to mind instantly was, for anyone who feels like they're living a muted life. That's really it. So if you feel that there's more to life than what you are feeling and experiencing, the book may resonate.
I love that description of a muted life. As you were talking about your magical mystery tour, I went through something similar as what you went through, and I equated it to like the Wizard of Oz, like what it was like for Dorothy before in black and white, and then stepping through that door into Technicolor, and how weird it was, and all of those things. But you do get a very different perspective when you go through a trial by fire like that. And what I really appreciated about your book was it was really candid as far as like, this isn't I'm sitting on my cushion and I'm feeling enlightened. This is like, it's hard. You mentioned sloppy, it's messy, and all of those things. And yes, when we go through a transformation like this, the process is very messy, but the other end of that is what's on the other end of that are things that you can't even imagine when you're going through all the messiness and the sloppiness.
And I think that's important to point out because I think people have this idea that it's a matter of sitting in a lotus position and oming and namasteing and all of that. I mean, you could certainly do that. But truly, the process is whatever it is and however you show up. And it's interesting that you said the thing about the Wizard of Oz, because in the heart section of the book, which I can talk about later, I talk about feeling all the feels and thinking of our basic emotions as the RGB of the red, green, and blue of our lives, so that we can truly live in Technicolor. So spot on.
All right, wonderful. Now, we should say the title of your new book is called Free to Be, a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul. And I love in the intro, you say this book is about excavating your soul from the massive jumble called life. And so maybe we start with this concept of the soul. And I'm taking this right from your book. You said, I believe there are powers, frequencies, energies far beyond our comprehension that are constantly at work, This belief is why I'm endlessly fascinated where science and spirituality dance together in all sorts of magical patterns. I love that. And I also believe in a God within. For me, it's the true definition of the soul. So you make the distinction, and you mentioned it already, between the heart and the soul. So maybe we can start there, because we collectively tend to use that interchangeably. So maybe just give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I think a really important one. You know, a lot of people refer to our hearts as our inner child, which sometimes sounds cliche. In the book, I call it our inner puppy. All the heart wants is to be loved, to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be cared for. That is it. But to ask it to guide us, I think, is misplaced. Our soul, once we find it, reclaim it, and work from it, there is a wisdom in it that doesn't reside in the heart. Knowing that distinction is important, because if we do get upset, if we do get disappointed, any of those things, that doesn't mean that the soul isn't doing what the soul is supposed to. So the soul could say that, you are meant to be a incredible singer, say, and you get up on stage and you give it your all, and you don't get the reception that you want, and your heart is really hurt by it. So you tend to your heart and you're like, I sorry it didn't turn out the way I still love you. I still see you. You are safe. And your soul is still like the badass warrior it always is. It's like there could be explosions happening and you're still walking through the field. That's what the soul does. So that's the distinction, really. Not that the heart isn't important, it's incredibly important, but it's like, you know tasking a a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old with something someone should do who has a PhD in that knowledge.
Yeah, and I like that example, because it's like the soul is the all-knowing that says, yes, you were born and destined to be a singer. It's the heart that says, oh, and I have to get up on stage, where the soul's like you can sing in the shower too. What I love about the distinction is that the heart is what's leading you to try all kinds of things because it's emotionally driven. Yet there is this inner knowing that it's not the expectation, it's not the outcome, it's the thing itself. It's you singing and what that does to you and to your spirit.
Correct. And the excavation that I talk about really has to do with disassociation. And there are a lot of studies about disassociation that's somewhere between age 0 and 5 or age 0 and 7. We disassociate from our inner essence, our true selves. And to the degree that we disassociate has to do with the environment and what happens, but we all disassociate. So it could be that a toddler disassociates because it doesn't feel safe in the environment it's in, but it could also be a toddler who is crying in the crib and the parents took a little too long to come and get it. Somehow the baby, the toddler, the young child does not feel that it is either safe or worthy. So it stops taking its natural cues from the inside, the true essence, and begins doing so from the outside, and starts learning all the do's and don'ts and the rules and regulations. And then we start with education, and there's the grades, and then there's the awards, and the certificates. And, you have to do this in order to get to the college that you want, and study this to get the degree that you want. But outer cues, outer cues, outer cues. And we adjust accordingly. Okay, I could do that. I study this. I could do this to make this much money to have that position, and all of that is great, except for the fact that the cues are all coming from the outside rather than from your true essence. And what happens at some point, as it did to me, that if that is what your life is based on, it ends up not meaning much. So the excavation that I talk about, and again, it isn't like, hey, go excavate. It's very much a step by step how to process, because a lot of the books that I read, which were fantastic, like I was like after I'm like, how, So this is very much the how to do the excavation. And then once you are able to find your soul and reclaim it, what do you do with it? How do you set it free? How do you live from that space? So, and I can talk about the structure of the book if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into that, but something just came to mind as you were speaking, and I'm curious, now that you were able to bring your essence back in by going through the steps that we're going to talk about, how has your life fundamentally changed as a result of that?
It's not rainbows and butterflies every day. What is incredible is that, musicians talk about being in their flow. And I think they're in their flow because they are in touch with their true essence, their soul. That's what is coming through, whatever instrument or their voices. And I feel that I live that way. And I now say that the only time I realize that I am not living in my flow is when I'm off course, or it's just like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And so I stop everything and recenter. But I would say the majority of the time, like 95% of the time, I feel like I am in it. And I liken it to the visceral feeling of learning balance on a bike. Like you can't unlearn that, right? You get on a bike and it's there. So that is the visceral feeling that I have on a daily basis as I'm talking to you. And the driver, the belief that I have, that is that as long as I am in that flow, truly living my true essence, that I can't go wrong, because this is what was meant for me. It sort of has a feeling of being in love, though it's not that heightened, but it's this true feeling of connectedness, but not just with one person, I mean, I'm feeling it right now. I feel it when I play with my puppy, when I go for a walk, when I do the things that I do. So, and I wrote the book so that it would be experiential and immersive, so that it wouldn't be conceptual. That wouldn't be, I recently likened it to the difference between thinking about skydiving and actually skydiving, I mean, very, very different feelings, like, oh, yeah, well, maybe I'd do that, or maybe I wouldn't do that. And like, holy,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Right. But what I appreciate is that it wasn't prescriptive. Like there were suggestions, and there's a lot to choose from of what resonates for all the different readers, that will find their way to this book, which I really appreciate. It wasn't like do these 5 things. It's here are some things that might resonate. Pick one, try it, give it a try. Right.
Yeah, and I think that is really important to point out. Buddhists call those who practice Buddhism practitioners. So it's in the practice of doing it. And especially in the West, we are so incredibly busy. Like I get off this interview, you get off this interview, there's like, we have our list so when do you spiritual? When do you do that, right?
Right.
So the book is intended to not only be immersive and experiential, but integrated within our everyday lives. So you can do so if you are at a stoplight. I actually have a meditation that is very quick, and I often do at stoplights with eyes open. I want to point that out.
Very helpful in San Francisco and New York.
Yes, correct. So, so yes, it's so to customize it and integrate it and truly experience the process rather than reading the pages and be like, oh well, that's interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned the structure of the book before. It's in two parts. The first is about releasing what no longer serves. And the second is about how to fill that space with soul leading and soul nurturing habits and practices, to the point that you just made. And so the first thing that you talk about is the mental impact. We start with the mind, right? The mental impact of information overload. What is information overload from your perspective, and how do we begin to ease it?
The mind detox, the brain detox is the number one chapter and week, because that is the biggest culprit in it is the biggest way that we stand in our own way. So that's like the first thing that needs to be cleared. There's really two main takeaways of that week. One is that we are not our thoughts, which is the definition of awareness. It's creating the ability to step out of our thinking. So, as Michael Singer says, and Eckhart Tolle does too, to be the witness to our thinking rather than being lost in our thoughts. And creating that separation is so liberating. It's like the biggest, I would say probably the biggest aha moment I had was when I realized that I was not my thoughts. Because when you realize that you have thoughts and thoughts don't have you, tremendous power and freedom in that. Because then you can pick and choose. Like, okay, there's that thought. Is it true? Is it not? I'm not. Yeah, maybe. Come in, sit in the back of the bus. I'll tend to you whenever. This thought, yeah, okay, yeah, it works for me. It makes sense. It works in my life. I'm going to hold on to that. So we don't choose the thoughts that come into our heads, and there's 60,000 thoughts a day, and they say that 80% of them are negative, and up to 95% of them are repetitive. So you imagine this washing machine of crap that is repeating. And then what do? This day and age, we turn on the screen and information, 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 information. So there is infoxication is real and true. And it basically is content overload. And when we're in a state of infoxication, we can't truly think clearly. And I would say that the majority of us are going through our days not being able to think clearly because there is so much information coming at us. So, all to say that it is truly up to us to say no more. So we decide how much information we consume and how we consume it. So the first week is all about that. It's our relationship with our minds and not necessarily what we allow in, though there is that as far as external content, but also choosing what thoughts we carry, what wolf we feed, so to speak. So that's the extent of week one. And the thought is that if we are able to separate ourselves from our thoughts and limit information that comes to us, then we create a space for our soul to guide us. But as long as we have the monkey mind chatting away, there's no way we can make room for that. So that's week number one.
Yeah. And I think the point that you made about awareness is a really important one. I think it was Pema Chodron who said that we are sky, everything else is just weather.
Yes.
So having that perspective of like, there's going to be weather there, but that's not you, right? And how do you make that distinction? And so then the next couple of weeks are all about creating space. And then when we get to the fourth week, if we've done all the hard work of releasing what no longer serves, the second half of the book begins with a chapter on play. And I have to tell you, as a recovering type A myself, play has never come naturally. So when I got to that chapter, I took a deep breath, but there was a quote that I loved, and it was, play is a state of mind rather than an activity. And I was like, that resonated. I'm like, okay, I'm in. I want to know more about this. So you mentioned flow before. My question is about that. Is immersion in an activity a way to play, or is it a way into play?
I think it depends on the intention and the activity. So, and I have to ask a question before I talk about this. Is there a play personality type that resonated with you?
There was explorer and there was creator for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny because mine is explorer, creator, and joker.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't have Joker. Storyteller was kind of on the border there because there was a storyteller in there as well.
So the activity truly is, I say that you have to choose the activity intentionally, unintentionally, purposely, purposelessly, because the only rule of play is that you don't do it for a certain purpose or a certain goal. So if you are going to do cartwheels in your backyard, if you are doing cartwheels and you're like, well, this is really good for my, I'm getting my workout, and look, I'm cartwheeling better than the other person. And, I'm going to count how many times I cartwheel. That's not play. Play is just going and doing cartwheels and being silly. Like my go-to is dancing, like no one's looking. If I'm on the dance floor and I'm with friends, I've got when I'm dancing alone, it's some sort of like jungle dancing and all of that. And it's interesting because I was in Florida a couple of months ago, and I was watching these kids on the beach. They were all like maybe like 5-ish. And they were so intentionally, they had their buckets, and I think they were creating some sort of castle or structure by the water line. So you knew that it was going to be gone within an hour, right? But I mean, they had their roles. There was like, team spirit. They were handing things to each other and all of that. And they didn't, it wasn't like they were.
And it was natural.
And it wasn't like they were laughing their butts off or anything. It was very like, we're going to do this. They were creating a moat and, all this stuff. But that's it. Like it was just they're in their flow. They're doing their thing. This is what lights them up, and it will be gone within an hour. So that is play.
Gotcha. I wanted to wrap up with, I saw an article that you wrote for Rolling Stone about the shifts and the positive actions we can take to untangle our careers from our identity. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this is a large part of our audience comprised of people in midlife transitions. And with the work that I do, I find that this is one thing that really trips people up. I was this. I'm not what I'm about to become. Like, who am I in this middle liminal space here? And so I thought it would be really helpful for the audience if you could just speak a bit about why it's important to untangle our personal identities from our career and maybe how we might be able to do that proactively.
Absolutely. It's a bit of a phenomenon, especially in the US, when, you're at a party, you're wherever you are. Who are you? Oh, I'm a banker. Oh, I'm an accountant. Oh, I'm a plumber. It's like So who are you when you're not plumbing and accounting and banking, right? So, are you, when you are acting as a mom, are you still that banker? You know what I mean? So now when people ask me, who are you? I always start with human first. And I'm like, I'm human. I am a mother to two gorgeous souls. I'm a wife. I'm and here are the things that I do. And I probably give them a much longer answer than what they expect, but that's truly it. Like, I can't say I'm a media executive. That is such a small portion. It's like saying I'm Sagittarius. That's what who are you? I'm Sagittarius. It's that's not how it works, but the way that this society works, especially, that's what we lead with to, you know, give ourselves some credibility or whatever it is. So identification with a career is truly temporal, whether it lasts, 5 years or 50 years. And if your ID is wrapped up around that, once you stop doing what you do, whether it is for, at the end of the day or, when you retire, then your self-worth is wrapped up in what you have identified yourself with, and you are at a quandary of who I am. So instead of clocking in for 50 years as the banker, and then, at retirement age saying, oh my God, what do I do when I'm not, or, you know, whatever that quandary is, what if you shifted that conversation so that it would be, I am who I am, and here are the ventures that I have undertaken. And maybe one venture lasts your entire life, or you do many various things. But that's the difference, that you underneath it all, you are the gorgeous human that you are, and that you do a variety of things. And the other thing that does is that if you decide mid-career that what you've been doing isn't resonating with you, and you make that shift, it isn't so, oh my God, this person was in film production and now they're in finance. It's sort of like, this really resonated with me for some time, and now I'm shifting. I mean, I tell people, they're like, yeah, Shirin is media executive and entrepreneur turned spiritual teacher. And I'm like, well, spiritual teacher is yet to be seen, hopefully. And I haven't turned. It's part of my evolution, and I'm still executive producing projects and such. So that's what I mean.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for being here. Before we wrap up, please tell folks how they can get in touch with you. And most importantly, where can they buy your book?
Thank you. That will be theirs. So the book is available on many platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and others. Actually, if you go to my website, ShirinEtessam.com, you'll see all the various places that it's available online. Also, hopefully at your small independent bookstore, please check to see if it is there. And if it's not, ask for it, because that is important to me. And so, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, probably the easiest way to find them. Anything associated with me as a author and this process is under my name. So ShirinEtessam.com. My social is also at Shirin Etessam, whether it's Instagram or TikTok.
All right. Well, I will link up the book. I will link up your website. OML and the Rolling Stone article, which I found very interesting. So I'll get all that linked up, and such a wonderful conversation. I thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the book. I'm sure it will find its way out there.
Thank you so much for the conversation and the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.